here we are for the next episode of Field Notes Down to Earth Leadership Conversations. We are picking seminal articles from academia. I've got Emotional Intelligence here from Salovey and Mayer, written in 1990. And we're going to deep dive on these articles, bounce them against life experience, against other thoughts that we have in the topic. Talking about this week, we're talking about emotional intelligence. So back before 1990, emotional intelligence wasn't even really a thing. Nobody talked about it. Nobody cared about it. People thought if you had high IQ, you would go far. And if you didn't, you couldn't. That's why we had the IQ test. And there's a heavy emphasis on that. Salovey and Mayer, I think the story goes, we're watching a bunch of executives bumble around and really smart people be so dumb when they're working together. And that led to this idea of emotional intelligence. 1990, the article titled by the concept. And then Daniel Goleman took it and ran with it, did a lot of great work on it. But honestly, I'm excited about this article because it's the first time it was meaningfully talked about in the literature that I know of. And I think the way that they lay it out makes more sense to me than Goleman's four domains and all of that stuff that kind of came out later in the pop culture, emotional intelligence, executive offsite type stuff. So, Trevor, stoked to have this conversation with you. Why this article for you? What's interesting about
Yeah, again, for me, anytime we get into some concepts that we're using a lot or that we always hear, it's always good to go back to that original document. Like, understand what the foundations are, what the scholars were talking about, and then you can actually see that trail of how it's morphed to where it is today. And again, the interesting thing that I started looking at is like the concept or the thought was that something else was there other than intelligence goes all the way back to like 1920s when they were talking about the social intelligence aspect of it. And then Salovey and Mayer, just like you said, formalized it in 1990, and then we started going from there. But starting with this original document, I think is key to understanding emotional intelligence as we know it today. And the way they put it together is super easy, like very straightforward and simplistic for anybody to understand.
yeah is kind of a step by step guide to using emotions. I want to ground us in some definitions. They define, and I think the literature defines emotions as a subjective response to an internal or external stimulus that includes behaviors and physiological differences. So it's not a feeling. It could be a feeling, but I could feel cold. That's not an emotion. It is a response to something that happened. It might be like a thought that I have, an internal experience. It could be an external experience, like my friend comes down and looks sad, and I have some empathetic response. Then there's a physiological aspect to it. It's not just like this touchy feely thing. My body changes, the hormones inside change. I get fear and adrenaline goes up. My sweat glands start giving sweat. My body shunts blood. Like, things happen with emotions. It's not a mood. A mood is this longer, more diffuse experience. Emotions are very immediate. Something happens, it's unfair. I become angry, whatever it is. So I'm gonna lift their definition right from the article and see what you think about it here. It's a subset of social intelligence, so how we interact with other people, that involves the ability to monitor one's own and others' feelings and emotions, and to discriminate among them, and to use this information to guide one's thinking and actions. Is that is that still right? I mean, this is one of the first definitions of emotional intelligence. Are they missing stuff? What do you think?
Yeah, the funny thing to me is like when I started digging into it more and like just getting down to the root of everything, like what is intelligence? You start looking at IQ versus what we call EQ or the true emotional intelligence. What's the difference between the two? Like, and that can take you down a whole different rabbit hole. And I kind of got sucked down that myself. But looking at it from social intelligence, just using their definition of it being emotional intelligence being a subset of social intelligence, that kind of falls flat because like social intelligence has fallen off of the research radar kind of in recent times, and it's almost like we're if we're using their definition, we're basing it on something that's non-existent today or not widely recognized in academic literature. So from that aspect, I don't know that I agree with it. But yes, the rest of it absolutely seems spot on. And like you were talking about definitions, is the emotion being that trigger, that physiological response like that, and then feelings is kind of how you're labeling that physiological response after you recognize that it's going on. So that's because I had to dig in as well and go, okay, like what are we talking about here? And I think they did a decent job outlining that in their definition so that we could all kind of understand that they are two very, very distinct things that are connected.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty impressive for writing an article on something that hasn't really existed before. They do a pretty good job outlining it. And then, I mean, all of this still, everything to me seems still relevant and useful. I do want to dig into intelligence. I'm a fanboy of Howard Gardner. He wrote multiple intelligences, studied intelligences for a long time. For a long time, we thought intelligence was IQ. Like, can you do math well or not? Can you write well and have a high vocabulary? He split it up into, I think, 9 intelligences, maybe more now. And really, his definition of intelligence is being able to use data to solve problems or create value. And that might be math. Like AI is statistical algorithms of math that intelligent people created. That's cool. That is creating value. It is solving problems. But it could be spatial. It could be kinesthetic athletes, surgeons who are able to do minute, uh, using a scalpel to do insane things to help people. There are different ways of processing the world and the data and information that come at us. And it's very much alive. Like they literally talk about Gardner in their article about his interpersonal, meaning how do I interact with other people, and intrapersonal, meaning how do I reflect and maintain awareness around my own being, self, knowledge, concept. It's almost word for word the same. And being able to use that data, like I have empathy, I can see your facial expressions and your tone, hear your words, imagine your experience, and use that data to make better decisions, to relate better with you, and to get things done and solve problems. So I thought that was really cool that those two are very much aligned, and I like the way that they're. In my mind, Daniel Goleman is kind of like a hack. Like, oh, emotional intelligence can help you lead better. Here's a hack for you, but this is very down to earth. There's a bunch of data, your intuitions, your feelings, your emotions, what you're experiencing from other people. How do you use it to solve problems and create value? What do you think about the conversation around intelligence?
Yeah, like there's definitely, I think this is where I was looking at it and going, okay, like it's all very interesting academically, right? That you can dig into, and people have made careers out of trying to dissect all this stuff and come up with the meanings and those sorts of things. And again, like it's interesting, but the thing to me that's more compelling is, okay, what's regardless of if we think it's a type of intelligence or not, it is 100% validated that there's something to it. And how do we actually get to that application? And that's really the important thing for me as we go forward. That's for, everybody
Yeah,
in academia. We can debate it, we can do all these things, but taking and looking at everybody's their own interpretation and synthesis of it and going, okay, this is cool. Now this is how I can actually use it. Like that's so the
yeah,
discussion around it. I would love for people to continue to poke holes back and forth. No, this one doesn't work. This one doesn't work. Because as they do that, we gain more and more insights in how it can be used going forward.
yeah. So I love it, Trevor. You're saying like bring it back down to earth, and I would push back and say the intelligence piece is critical because IQ is relatively fixed after an age. We know that, and likely like my musical intelligence is not good. It is not. I don't think I'm ever going to be a piano protege, and I'm trying to learn it right now, and I'm having fun, but it's not good, right? So, if emotional intelligence is, in fact, as academics define it, an intelligence, it would lead us to think that you couldn't get that much better at it, And that's not what the research shows. And when I'm teaching this, I like to call it social emotional skills, because it very much learning to become in tune with your emotions, to listen to your body, to listen to other people, get build empathy, even caring. Like you can learn to care more. Maybe not if you're a sociopath, but I don't know. What do you think? Like, how do you think that it is a skill or an intelligence? And if it's a skill, what do we do with that?
Yeah, that's exactly where I was going. Like the fact that it is a skill and not necessarily an intelligence, because it has been proven. Like those through the experimentation and everything else that's gone on in academia, we've actually come to the conclusion that you can train these things. And that's why, it's when I think about emotional intelligence, I get kind of a chuckle because I'm like, all right, well, this is a skill that we can train. So I'm not sure that I buy emotional intelligence, but as far as intelligence goes, but again, very, very practical. And yes, the skills are 100% trainable, unless you've got those outliers for, that have something that prevents them from actually building on skills and understanding, empathizing, and being able to recognize emotion, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So I want to ask, like, how do we do that? Because I see really great curriculum. Like my daughter in kindergarten last year, her teacher was giving her tangible tools that honestly are more useful and actionable than anything I've ever seen in an executive leadership workshop that we don't do. How do you teach emotion? Like normally you get in a room, a stuffy room with a bunch of other executives or mid-level leaders, and you talk about feelings and how they're important, and you have to be an active listener and nod as people are talking. It's horse crap. How do you actually like teach and build these skills? Because I think it's critical for a functioning society.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's funny that your daughter is at school, right? They're teaching these things, and we go. That just made me go back and kind of do a scroll through, my memory bank on going to school, and like we didn't talk about emotion or how to do
You,
any
you
of
went
these
to
things.
you went to school before this article is even written, Trevor.
Yeah, that's right. I sure did. I sure did.
Maybe
But
me
it was,
too.
and I think that might be part of the reason why we see because leaders of organizations for the vast majority of it, I would say are right around our age, older than us, those sorts of things, and just because the framework didn't exist back then. Like, of course, we never learned how to discuss it or really label it and do those sorts of things. And as I was digging through and looking at things, the mood meter, like there's mood meters for that they teach, like kindergarten through third grade or whatever. And I'm like, that's
That's what
amazing.
I'm talking about. That's what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. Like what executive, if you walked up to them, would be able to say like, "Hey, I'm kind of in the blue zone today. This is how it's going to impact my decisions and interactions with you." But my daughter did that every day. She filled in a square and it was like Monday, Tuesday, green, green. It went to blue and red, Thursday, and then green again on Friday for some reason. I don't know. But how valuable is that to be in tune with your emotions and mood enough to say like, hey, this is where I am, and that's going to impact how I make decisions. It's going to impact how I talk to you, how I'm able to listen, all of the things that I have to do. Crazy, crazy useful.
And really, exactly, crazy useful, and especially for people that haven't looked at it before, and whether people think it's sophomoric to bring that up or any of those sorts of things in an executive, it's really not. Like if it's not a concept that we've been practicing that we've looked at and is accepted, like everything's theory until you get a good visual picture. Like, and that is an absolutely amazing visual picture for people to use. And I think it's something that, because we don't see it a lot in corporate America. When you go out and do the coaching and helping clients and everything else, it's extremely valid to bring up.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, to throw in some data and science behind why this stuff is important, there's this awesome study on the London Stock Exchange where if people could stock traders could feel their heartbeat, and they measured this. Like I read through the study, they measured it by like giving them a minute and asking how many times their heart beat, You can't touch anything like your pulse or feel anything. You literally are just trying to feel in your chest your heart beating, which I have a real hard time with. I don't know about you. I have to really focus to do that. And they bounced it against, like, they measured their heartbeat, and if their heart rate was 67 and the person said 67, like, they scored high. If they were off and they scored low, the people that scored high made more money, made better decisions in trades, made trades faster, and stayed in that industry longer. We're able to make that a sustainable career, not so stressful. Um, that's so cool. And like I say, I'm not good at it. And I think, to your point, even this article starts with, like, for a long time, emotions were these bad things, like, oh, they cloud your judgment. You have to, like, lock them in a box, or you can't think like an executive. And in fact, data and science show that if you're not in tune with your heart rate, you're going to make slower decisions that are poorer because there's this whole stream of data that you're missing out on. What do you think?
Yeah, and that brought up. It was interesting how in the article that you're mentioning the different time frames that they did it. Yes, all those things that you were talking about. Um, but it was also interesting to me of like how fast they were able to make the decisions. That right, the gut feel to the assessment, the analysis to an outcome. Right, the people that were able to do that fastest were the ones that obviously had the longevity and the profitability and those sorts of things. Um, and that made me think about, is there something inherent in those individuals that are able to do those things? Are they strictly just operating off of that quote unquote gut feeling and just making a decision, and most of the time it happened, or are they actually going through the process and um, labeling and actually making a cognitive decision that has data backing behind it, or are they just running with it? If that's the
Yeah.
case, like, how do you train that portion of the gut feel and immediate reaction? Right, that's the next one that kind of I wanted to dig into later on, obviously. But
Yeah. No,
like,
I mean, I think that's a great question. And I think you have to train two pieces. One is you have to be in tune with your gut feeling. If you're not, they talk about alexithymia, and that is you can't articulate or feel emotions. And so I think the test is they, like, show a bus that's about to run you over, and people with normal emotions are like, oh my God, I'm scared, right? I'm terrified. This is awful. Alexithymia are like, a bus is about to hit me. It's just like this different, they're not in touch with their emotions. They're like, well, here's a fact, like, this bus is bad, which is fascinating. So, like, for me, I can't feel my heartbeat. I would have a hard time stock trading on London Stock Exchange unless I was able to train that and really tune in, be mindful, spend time, like, feeling my body, and cognitively linking, like, okay, like, this butterfly in my stomach means I'm anxious. This, like, twitch in my jaw means I'm angry. This light feeling in my chest means I'm excited. Like, getting that granularity. The other side of this is I call it informed intuition. I do not trust people's intuition. Like, if a 20-year-old person is backcountry skiing with me and they say, like, I got a gut feeling we should or shouldn't ski this slope, I could care less, right? They have no idea. Like, who cares about your gut feeling? This is the first time you've been on a backcountry slope. If a AMJ certified guide tells me that a slope that by all of the data is safe is not safe because of a gut feeling, 100%, I'm not going to trust that slope, because they have all of this built up data in their emotional brain that's telling their gut, like, something's not right here, something doesn't add up, whether or not we have dug the pits and have all the right data or not. So I think, like, getting in tune with your gut and then building experience, informed intuition. And I guess the third piece of that is reflecting, really. Like, do you make a decision on a stock exchange and then look at it and be like, oh, that wasn't a great decision. Here's how I felt about it. Write about it in a journal. That will speed up that process. What do you think on how to make those gut feelings useful? Because really, right, this whole article is arguing gut feelings are emotional intelligence.
yeah, well, I'm not, and I might not 100% agree with you on that one. That is the emotional intelligence. Like, I think the way I took it on their article is all of the processes that go into it. To me, gut, um, Like gut feeling is more of a not necessarily putting it all together, but just feeling that something is wrong and taking action on it without understanding everything that goes with it, cognitive, like actually putting mental energy towards it. Whereas somebody that's emotionally intelligent is actually stopping, right? Stopping to assess and do the analysis of, hey, why am I feeling this way? Why is the other person that I'm interacting with, why are they potentially feeling that way, going back and forth? And it's that's kind of what I see with emotional intelligence itself, as opposed to the gut feel.
But aren't you then vis-a-vis saying that emotional intelligence is only intelligence if it's processed through a cognitive verbal lens? Because I kind of agree. I think a Stoic would say what you're saying is true. And also, it discounts people with interpersonal or intrapersonal intelligence by saying if you can't articulate it, meaning verbal intelligence, it's not actually intelligence. I don't know. I don't know the answer there.
Hmm. Yeah, and again, like that is interesting. I'm not 100% sure on any of that. Like, there's got to be some aspect to it. If you can't come up with, and again, not the four emotions that everybody would like normally say when there's this huge spectrum. Like, if
Yeah,
you can't articulate that there's differing, like, I'm not just angry. There's a whole bunch of
yeah,
different spectrums of angry. Like, if you can't understand that and label it and kind of attribute um,
yeah.
your
I mean,
physiological response to it, I'm, like, I'm not sure that you're emotionally intelligent, or maybe there's
well,
that spectrum of emotional intelligence.
I want to agree totally. And I'm a verbal intelligence guy. I get great scores on all the verbal tests. I love processing, reading, listening, thinking in words. So I'm a pretty biased judge of what you're saying, I think. And I wonder if someone who's truly emotionally intelligent, like they might just do the right thing. They might just perceive that you're angry and give you a hug because of that emotional intelligence. And if you ask, like, "Hey, what was that about?" You're like, "I don't know. You seem like you needed a hug." I don't know. That is like a really tough question because I
Yeah,
want to
and
say,
then,
"Oh, that's not intelligence. They don't even know what they're doing," but they're
and digging
more
down, like,
emotionally intelligent than me.
right, yeah, and like using that scenario, it's interesting because like they just seemed like they needed a hug. Okay, well, why did they seem like they needed a hug? Like, what? And then doing that backtrace and see, was it their collective experience over the years, and they're able to just process it that fast that they don't even
Yeah.
recognize it anymore. But all of those processes are still in the background. Like,
Here's what I'm thinking. I think that's emotional intelligence. I don't think what we're talking about is emotional intelligence, but I think for the vast majority of people like you and I who are told emotions are evil, box them up, don't let them get into your decisions, we need that verbal bridge to get to that place. Like we can't, you can't just, and that's what emotional intelligence training does. Like, be in touch with your feelings, just make decisions using intuitions, blah blah, like the soft, touchy feeling stuff. And really, we need like, hey, reflect on what happened, label the emotions, work backwards, what caused them, and that's what we need to get to a point where we can intuit the right thing to do emotionally, probably over a lifetime
yeah, and
at
again,
least.
we all, you look at, say, we've all been in conversations with individuals or in meetings, and somebody says something, and the leader of the meeting or whoever you're talking just flies off the handle, completely overreacts, like doesn't consider anything, just that immediate visceral reaction. Sometimes they'll come back.
Yeah, yeah. That's a recovering verbally intelligent person. The emotionally intelligent person would fly off the handle at just the right moment that everyone on the team needed that like kind of emotional shock to galvanize and move forward. And I've seen that. Like some people yell at
Yep.
just the right time. We are speaking of time at time. Um, what are two or three like, key things coming out of this for you?
Oh man, that emotional intelligence, like, it can be trained. You can recognize and actually train on these things and get better at it. And I would say the other one is if you haven't looked at a mood meter like I hadn't, like go out and check out
Nice.
a mood meter. Like take a look at it. It's
It's so
extremely
useful.
useful. Yeah, absolutely. So
We'll,
that'd be my two right off the bat.
we'll link that in the show notes for sure.
What are you
I
thinking?
think for me, a new thing coming up is this idea of you have to both create experiences to inform your intuition and also get in touch with, like, spend time actually trying to feel your heartbeat, get that interoception. Because if you don't have a clear information highway between your body and how it feels and your mind, like, you can't really access or use all of this data around us and be emotionally intelligent. So good stuff. Next week, your turn to pick the article. I'm excited to see what you throw at us and have the conversation. Thanks as always for digging in, making this academic stuff a little more down to earth.
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate it.